Why ancient Rome was filthy boring history for sleep asterisk. Let your mind wander back through the centuries. Drift past the tangled thickets of the Middle Ages and the wild forests of northern Europe. Settle instead on the vast sunlit sprawl of the Roman Empire at its height. Imagine you are there, not as a senator or a general, but as a regular citizen, a baker, a slave, a street child, or a weary water carrier living your life beneath the columns, rooftops, and crowds of Rome. It's easy to picture the city in grand terms, marble temples, soaring aqueducts, glittering togas, but breathe in a little deeper, and you'll notice that the Rome of everyday life was dirty. This is not the filth of ruins and centuries of dust, but a living, pulsing human mess created by a million people jostling for space inside the city's walls. Let's start with the streets, because that is where almost everyone spends most of their day. You wake in a cramped apartment, a sooty, fire-prone insula on the 3rd or 4th floor, well above the smells and noises of the forum below, but not so high that you can escape the city's constant din. The apartment is tiny, the walls thin, and there are no bathrooms. Your neighbors are close, sometimes closer than you'd like. Privacy is a rare and fleeting thing. You step outside and are met by a wave of sound, hawkers calling out for business, the clatter of wooden wheels, the bellow of oxen, the endless chatter of thousands. The ground beneath your feet is not paved. Marble but worn, cobblestones, and, in the poorer districts, hard-packed dirt. The dust rises with every step, coating everything. Clothes faces food stalls with a thin, gritty film. But it isn't just dust you're treading through. As you walk, you must be careful to dodge piles of dung horse, ox, donkey, dogby, because animals are everywhere. Even the grandest senators ride in carriages pulled by mules. Most goods are hauled on the backs of animals, and there is little effort to keep the streets clean. On rainy days, these droppings mix with water and turn the lanes into a slippery, reeking mud. Your sandals squelch, and sometimes you slide, barely catching yourself on a wall or a passing neighbor. Street cleaners, public slaves, known as viators or scoperi, do exist, but they are too few, and the filth too plentiful. Their tools are simple. Brooms made of twigs, buckets of water, a few spades for the largest messes. The city employs them to sweep major roads, but in the winding back alleys, refuse piles up quickly. People toss their trash, bones, broken pottery, spoiled food, even excrement right out of windows or doorways, sometimes with a warning, sometimes not. The phrase, "look out below," has real meaning here. Even the famed Roman sewers, the Cloaca Maxima, struggled to keep up. Built centuries earlier, the main drains served the city center well enough, but most apartment buildings and side streets are not connected. Instead, residents use chamber pots manually at night, emptying them into the gutter at dawn. Sometimes, a careless toss sends more than just waste into the street. The unlucky and inattentive occasionally receive a very rude awakening. Their smells are overwhelming, especially in summer. Stagnant water from fountains and cisterns collects in hollows, breeding mosquitoes and stinging flies. Street vendors cook cheap fish or offal over smoky fires, the grease mixing with the scent of humanity and animal dung. A dead animal might lie in a gutter for days before someone drags it away. Fresh water is precious. The famous aqueducts do bring water to the city, feeding grand public baths, fountains, and wealthy households. But for the poor, water is fetched from communal fountains, where the lines are long and tempers short. Buckets are heavy, and sometimes the water is not as clean as it seems. Contaminated sources spread disease. Typhoid and dysentery are common. Afflictions and outbreaks of plague have been known to sweep entire neighborhoods. Yet, life goes on. Housewives and slaves sweep their doorways each morning, hoping to keep at least a patch of the world clean. Children chase each other through the alleys, ignoring the filth. Merchants lay down rushes or straw in front of their stalls to absorb the worst of the mess. Bakeries, crowded and hot, fill the air with the scent of fresh bread, sometimes masking less pleasant odors that there are attempts at order. The Aediles city magistrates are responsible for public works, including sanitation. They post rules and fines about dumping waste in the streets, and sometimes, in a show of civic pride, organize major cleanups before a festival. But for the most part, the laws are poorly enforced. Too many people, too little space, and too few resources. The public baths are a marvel of the ancient world. Massive, steamy, humming with activity, they offer a brief respite from the city's grime. For a small fee, you can wash yourself from head to toe, or at least soak in warm water. But even here, cleanliness is relative. The water is changed, infrequently. Bathers share the same pools, scraping dirt from their skin with a curved strigil, then dunking themselves back in. Lice are common. Fungal infections and skin diseases spread quietly. If you are rich, you can afford a private bath, perhaps even a servant to draw hot water and clean your clothes. But most Romans own only 1 or 2 garments, and these are rarely washed. Woolen tunics, once white, soon turn a dull gray. Linen undergarments, when they exist, are laboriously scrubbed in harsh lye by laundresses forlorns who stomp and beat the fabric in public laundries, adding a final insult by using urine as a source of ammonia to remove grease and stains. This last detail, a citywide system of collecting and recycling urine for laundry, might seem shocking, but in Rome, nothing goes to waste. Public urinals, vesicae, are placed along the busiest streets. Tax collectors even take a cut of the profits. The urine tax, imposed by Emperor Vespasian, becomes a source of revenue and a running joke among citizens. Household cleaning is minimal. Brooms are made from bundled twigs, swept across dirt or stone floors. Fleas and lice are a constant irritation. Bedbugs infest the straw mattresses of the poor. People dust their bodies with perfumed powders to mask the smell. Some burn incense or laurel leaves to freshen the air, but most simply learn to live with it. Food itself can be a source of filth. Markets teemed with vendors selling everything from fruit and honey cakes to questionable cuts of meat. Fish left too long in the sun turns quickly. Bread is often gritty with the dust of the street. The wealthy might enjoy exotic foods and imported spices, but the poor scrape by on beans, lentils, porridge, and whatever scraps they can afford. Rats and mice are ever present, scavenging at night. Despite it all, the city pulses with energy. The filth is not a sign of neglect, but a byproduct of scale and empire's heart, beating too fast for its own arteries to keep up. Romans complain, joke, and simply adapt. They gossip about the worst-smelling alleys and share tips for dodging chamber pot projectiles. A kind of communal resilience grows when everyone is dirty. Filth becomes unremarkable. But what happens in times of crisis when filth becomes more than just a nuisance? What do the people of Rome do when disaster strikes? When the systems of sanitation and water and food all begin to fail? The day is hot, the sky an unwavering blue dome over the city. Rome hums with the usual noise, street vendors shouting, carts rattling, the echo of distant hammers in workshops. But today, there's a new tension in the air, a rumor spreading that something is wrong with the water at the public fountain near the Subura district. It's not the first time people have whispered about water. Despite the marvel of the aqueducts, breakdowns are common. Stones shift, channels clog, and work crucives. They come at Alcan take days to find the problem. In the meantime, desperate citizens crowd the fountains, filling jars and buckets, watching for signs. Is the water cloudy? Does it smell odd? Is there anything floating in it? The city's lifeblood is fragile, and when it falters, filth quickly becomes dangerous. This morning, a local baker's apprentice comes down with a fever and stomach cramps. By afternoon, 3 of his neighbors are sick too. Word travels fast. Someone says it must be bad air, or perhaps the result of angering the gods. The local aedile, responsible for sanitation and public order, dispatches workers to inspect the aqueduct. They find a dead dog, swollen and foul, blocking the channel near the city's edge. Water has been trickling over its body for days. The men drag the carcass out and flush the system with as much clean water as they can muster, but the damage is done. People start boiling their water, those who can afford the extra fuel at least. Others simply hope for the best. Such incidents are not rare. In a city of 1 million, with limited understanding of disease and no real concept of germs, public health crises flare up often. Outbreaks of plague sweep through neighborhoods, sometimes true bubonic plague, other times typhoid, cholera, or dysentery, all fed by the soup of filth and gutters and contaminated wells. Officials respond as best they can. They post notices, close down markets, and urge people to stay away from the river, especially after heavy rain when runoff carries refuse into the Tiber. But compliance is spotty, and people still need to eat, to work, to fetch water. Vendors, desperate to avoid ruin, simply move their stalls a few streets over. Doctors Medici are called to homes, their treatments based more on tradition than science. They recommend aromatic oils, fumigation, purges, and prayers. Some suggest burning herbs like rosemary and juniper to purify the air. Others prescribe vomiting or bloodletting. A few quietly recommend avoidance. Stay away from the sick if you wish to live. But in crowded apartments, isolation is impossible. Inside the insulae, sickness spreads rapidly. The poor suffer most. Their homes, stacked 5 or 6 stories high, are built cheaply and packed tightly. Narrow wooden stairs, steep and creaking, make escape difficult. Fires, always a danger, are especially deadly now. As people crowd together to avoid the ill, their only escape down rickety ladders or ropes. During an epidemic, the streets become quieter. The bathhouses, normally full of conversation and laughter, grow empty as people avoid close contact. Theaters and arenas shut their gates. Some temples close while others fill with people seeking the protection of the gods. Offerings pile up: flowers, honey cakes, little clay models of sick children or animals. The priests burn incense and recite prayers, hoping to turn away the wrath that seems to hover over the city on such times. Filth takes on a new, more fearful meaning. Every pile of refuse, every stagnant puddle is viewed with suspicion. Flies swarm everywhere. Rats grow bolder, darting between market stalls. Even the dogs seem subdued, picking through garbage for scraps. Yet the city does not stop. Bakers still knead dough, but with a wary eye toward their neighbors. Butchers chop meat, hoping the smell of smoke and salt will ward off whatever evil lingers in the air. Foolers continue to wash and beat clothes in open courtyards, splashing water laced with urine and lye, believing that cleanliness, even if partial, is some protection. The officials organize large-scale cleanups, hiring gangs of slaves to sweep the streets, clear gutters, and carry away heaps of garbage to the edge of the city. Sometimes, they burn refuse in great pits, the smoke mingling with the fog at dawn. Other times, they simply dump it in the Tiber, where it floats downstream or settles in the reeds, waiting for the next flood to bring it back. The city's wealthier citizens take extra precautions. They withdraw to their country villas, far from the crowded, dirty heart of Rome. Servants scrub floors with vinegar. Water is boiled before drinking. Doctors are kept on retainer, ready to diagnose any cough or rash. For the poor, these measures are impossible. They must endure relying on tradition, luck, and whatever scraps of advice trickle down from their betters. Some try to fight back in other ways. Charms and amulets are hung in doorways to ward off evil. Mothers tie strings of garlic around their children's necks, hoping the smell will protect them. Old men recite spells or write prayers on scraps of papyrus, tucking them beneath pillows or into cracks in the walls. At the first sign of fever, herbal teas and poultices are prepared, more for comfort than cure. There is also a strange resilience in Roman humor. Graffiti scrawled on the city walls mocks the city's filth, complaining about chamber pots, slovenly neighbors, or the perfume of the streets. Poets and satirists make jokes about the city's smells, turning discomfort into community. The Emperor Vespasian, creator of the urine tax, is immortalized in jokes. Even his name becomes a punchline, as Vespasiani comes to mean public toilets. Yet beneath the laughter lies real suffering. The death toll rises. Some neighborhoods are nearly emptied. Bodies are carted out in the night and buried in shallow graves beyond the walls. Those who survive grow thinner, paler, more cautious. As the crisis passes, the city cleans itself up somewhat. New regulations are issued, more fines imposed. The sewers are dredged and the baths scrubbed. For a time, the streets are cleaner. The fountains run clear. Life resumes its normal pattern. But the city remains fundamentally filthy. The population grows, the infrastructure strains, and the cycle repeats. What does it mean to live in such constant, visible squalor? How does a society adapt, not just physically but mentally, to a world where filth is inescapable? And what kinds of resilience, what habits, what humor, what communal strength emerge from a city where every day is a battle against dirt, disease, and decay? As the city settles back into its routines, the shock of epidemics slowly fades into memory. The daily struggle with dust, refuse, and disease once again becomes the background noise of Roman life. The resilience of the city and its people is not marked by grand gestures or sudden transformations, but by countless small adaptations. By the slow evolution of habits that allow life to go on in spite of the dirt. You notice that your neighbors are sweeping more often, not with much hope of true cleanliness, but to keep the immediate doorstep bearable. At dawn, lines of women, sometimes children, carry buckets of water from public fountains to splash the ground, tamping down dust and pushing away the worst of the mess. In the afternoons, the laundry yards are filled with the slap of wet fabric, the reek of urine lye, and the low murmur of gossip. The bathhouses, those essential sanctuaries of urban life, are more crowded than ever. People linger not only for the warmth and company but for the illusion of purification. The process is ritualized, a scrape with a strigil, a quick dunk, a cloud of scented oil applied by a friend or servant. Here, gossip and news are exchanged, as well as jokes about the filth outside. It is here that you hear rumors of imperial decrees, another round of edicts about street sweeping, a new tax for sewer maintenance. No one expects much to change, but the announcements are a source of amusement. At home, daily life is a dance with dirt. You set aside sandals for inside wear, knock the dust from your tunic before sleeping, shake straw from your bedding to dislodge fleas and beetles. Cooking is done quickly, with lids clamped tight to keep flies at bay. The markets sell garlic and onions in abundance, not just for flavor but to mask the persistent background smell. Animals remain part of the urban landscape. Cats slink along walls and rooftops, hunting mice. Dogs bark and bicker over scraps. Chickens wander in and out of doorways. Even the city's famous monuments, the Circus Maximus, the Colosseum, are never entirely free of animal droppings and trash. The grand forums, for all their columns and statues, are just as likely to be crowded with street hawkers, pickpockets, and beggars as with senators or orators. Despite the grime, you find ways to cope. Some habits are born of necessity, others of ingenuity. You learn which fountains are less likely to be contaminated. You listen for the sound of the scopery, the street sweepers, and try to walk just behind them. You avoid certain alleys. At midday, when the sun bakes the refuse into a reeking stew, and you become adept at tuning out the background filth, focusing instead on the patterns of sunlight, the laughter in the bathhouse, the scent of fresh bread. Children especially seem immune to disgust. They run barefoot through alleys, chase dogs, splash in puddles, and invent games using whatever they find: sticks, rags, broken bits of pottery. Their resilience is a testament to adaptation. Their laughter echoes above the street noise, stubborn and bright. Not everyone is content, of course. Satirists and poets never tire of lampooning the city's squalor. Juvenal Marshall and other writers craft sharp verses about crowded insulae, malodorous baths, and rivers of filth. Who can sleep in Rome? Marshall asks, not those whose windows open onto the street, where the crash of carts and the calls of drunkards are joined by the sound of chamber pots being emptied from above. Even the emperor is not immune. Stories circulate about Vespasian's public toilets and the odor of money that comes from his urine tax. Over time, small improvements accumulate. The Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, undergoes repairs and expansions. Wealthy citizens sponsor new fountains or pay for fresh paving in their neighborhoods. Public laws against dumping are sometimes enforced, and for a few weeks each year, the city feels almost clean. But these moments are fleeting. The population outpaces the infrastructure, and the cycle of dirt begins anew. What does this relentless struggle against filth reveal about ancient Rome? Perhaps most of all, it highlights the limits of even the greatest empire. Despite the engineering marvels, the laws and the rituals, the city's daily life remains shaped by its sheer density and complexity. Filth is both a nuisance and a unifying reality. Everyone, rich or poor, must contend with it. Yet, there's another side to the story. The persistence of life in spite of filth is itself a kind of triumph. Rome's citizens developed not just methods of survival, but a shared identity, a sense of belonging forged in the press and bustle of the streets, the bathhouses, and the markets. They joke, they adapt, and they find dignity even where comfort is scarce. The legacy of this adaptation lingers long after the empire's fall. Later generations will marvel at Rome's aqueducts, its sewers, its scale, and also at its mess. Archaeologists will unearth layers of refuse and marvel at the detritus of daily life: worn sandals, broken pots, the gnawed bones of 1,000 street corner meals. They'll find graffiti scratched on the walls, laments about the noise and the stink, small notes of humanity preserved in stone. You may never become a senator or a patrician, but in learning to live with dirt, you become, in a quiet way, a survivor, part of the great anonymous mass that made Rome what it was, a place not of spotless marble, but of life in all its untidy, bustling reality. So the next time you think of Rome, imagine not just the triumphal arches and the marble baths, but the dust on your sandals, the chatter in the alley, the laughter in the bathhouse, the patience and humor that carry you through each messy day. This, too, is the story of the empire. And as dusk falls, you find yourself at your window, looking out over the rooftops, breathing in the mingled scents of cooking fires and city air. Tomorrow will bring more dirt, more struggle, and if you're lucky, another small moment of comfort carved from the chaos.